I am underage, so I can't speak to you directly, but I did want to get my story out there to share what can happen in secret to people who are not informed as to the after effects of pornography and the relational destructiveness that it can cause. So I grew up in a pretty dysfunctional family for most of my life. Had a verbally abusive father. I did not have a good relationship with anybody, and I didn't have good relationships modeled for me very often. By the time I was 10, I had pretty much free reign over my whole life. I was not parented very much. I was just kind of given the internet and the world and said, like, given free reign with it. I was able to do whatever I wanted. And this caused me to come across some really horrible things on the internet without any supervision. By the time I was 11, I had an active porn addiction. And it was something that I was always very ashamed of. It was something that I didn't tell people because it felt dirty and it felt belittling. I felt like I was worth less because of it. But what I did not realize was how damaging it was going to be for me when I started dating people. And I think that that's something that nobody ever really talks about, is how it conditions you to accept abuse and to think that that abuse is love. So when I started dating, I went into it with really warped perceptions of what a healthy relationship was from both my parents and from pornography. But my first boyfriend was a lot older than me, and the age difference alone should have been enough for me to see some dangerous signs, but I did not, and I fully believe that is because pornography had conditioned me to accept relationships that were between people of extreme age differences or inappropriate relational stances. And every relationship that I had, or that I have had in my life, has been highly influenced by porn. They all had very unhealthy power dynamics where I was always put into a submissive role that I did not want to be in, but that I thought was desirable because of pornography. I was pressured into a lot of things that I would never have accepted as love if I had not been introduced to pornography. As a child, I watched porn out of curiosity, but as I got older, I watched it to learn what to expect in relationships, especially sexually. I was uneducated, and I thought that through pornography, I could learn how to satisfy my partners and how to make them want to be with me. And unfortunately, that put me in some very dangerous situations. Every relationship that I had ended up becoming abusive sexually. And I fully believe that is because of porn. It would start off as me wanting to please them and just not standing up for myself, or I would just not say no to things because I thought that it would make them love me more if I submitted to them sexually. Because that's what the narrative of porn is that the girl is silent and she accepts whatever is done to her, or she even likes it. So I was 15, I think, when I was in my first relationship, and when my boyfriend started choking me or hitting me or doing all of these things that from an outside perspective would be seen as totally abusive or unacceptable, I would think back to all of the porn that I had watched and be like, well, this is normal. This is like a normal way of expressing sexuality. And I remember specifically this one instance with my first boyfriend where he choked me so hard that I lost consciousness. And I drove home, and it never even came to my mind that that was not okay. And looking back, that's the most disturbing part. It's not that these things happened to me, although that is horrible. It's that I never even questioned for a second if he was in the wrong. I just thought that I was in the wrong for not being able to take it. These are not stories that I share easily, and they go a lot deeper, and they're a lot more complicated than I can really get into. But I was sexually assaulted numerous times, and I did not think that it was bad because of pornography. I wish that somebody would have talked to me about the effects of pornography. I'm sharing these stories because I have little sisters who are the same age that I was when I was sexually assaulted for the first time. I watch them falling into this stuff, and I see myself having to step in and warn them not to put up with abuse from people who should love them. And it should be their parents, but it isn't. And parents have a lot more power than they think they do. If they can model bad relationships with each other, then they can definitely model a good relationship with each other to us. I turned to pornography because I didn't have anywhere else to turn, and I didn't know what it meant to be in a healthy relationship. And if somebody had just taken the time to talk to me, it would have saved me a lot of heartache and a lot of abuse and a lot of trauma that I should not have had to go through. I want parents to hear me when I say that they can do better and they have to, because no one should think that love is the same thing as abuse. And that's all that porn does, really, ultimately, is it teaches you to be complacent to abuse and to love your abusers for the abuse that they treat you with. I think that parents have done an abominable job. They have not taken the time to teach their children out of their own discomfort or maybe out of their own shame. And it doesn't matter what your relationship to your kids has been in the past, you're still their parent. And if you choose not to have this conversation with them, you're choosing to let them have this conversation some other time with someone else who is not their parent, because they will end up in situations that they should not be in if they're not given the proper tools to develop relationships well. Because people want to have relationships, and we want to learn how to have good relationships. And if that isn't taught to us and we're not warned of the dangers of bad relationships, then we will find our own education and we will teach ourselves through porn how to relate to other people. And that ends in the sexualization of young girls, very young, much too young. And it ends in an entire society of men and women who don't have a good, healthy understanding of sex. And it ends in me being a 15-year-old girl who has been sexually assaulted by my adult partner, and nobody ever thought to tell me that that was a situation that I shouldn't have to be in. I think that, especially as girls, we're told from a very young age that guys can't control themselves and that we shouldn't expect them to. And I fully believe that that is because of pornography. I don't think that men can't control themselves. I think that men have been taught that they don't have to, or that it's more desirable for them to take what they want. And that's just not the case. Porn affects your relationships with everybody, not just the people that you're in relationships with. It affects how you see everybody in the world. I can't change my siblings' understanding of relationships, and I can't protect them from this stuff. I'm still a kid, and I shouldn't have to be the one telling them that abuse is not the same thing as love. But I am. And I know so many people who are I have so many friends who are the only people telling their siblings that they can stand up for themselves or that they shouldn't sexualize other people. And Like, I wish that my parents had had the guts to talk to me about it. I think it's not only the fact that nobody talked to me because they didn't think that I was exposed to porn, it's the fact that I know that my parents were aware of my porn addiction and they actively chose not to parent me in that area. And I get it, it's uncomfortable. I would have been incredibly uncomfortable if my father had started talking to me about it. But I was much more uncomfortable when I was sexually assaulted and I thought that that was okay. And looking back on it, all I needed was a good influence to step in and say that I wasn't dirty or out of place or worth less because I was addicted to porn. In my later teenage years, I had a friend who was also a girl who talked about her addiction to porn, and the night that she shared that with me, I broke down sobbing and I cried for like 3 hours and I told her everything that had happened to me. And I realized that that was the first time that I had ever had to come to terms with what had happened. And she was just another kid. And it should have been my mom. It should have been my dad. I should have been able to talk about that, but there was never a place for me to talk about it. And I think that parents have the ability to make that place with that space for their kids to talk, and they don't because they're uncomfortable. And being uncomfortable is not a good enough reason to avoid that conversation.